On this episode of Building Men, Unlocking Manhood, a conversation with Thomas Pfanner. Thomas has over 15 years of experience coaching and teaching at the middle, high school, and collegiate levels. His drive to help young men succeed is what inspired the Unlocking Manhood project. His experience as an educator gives him a unique perspective on how schools are missing the mark in preparing young men to win in the game of life. Welcome to the Building Men podcast. I'm your host, Dennis Meralda. When was the last time you focused on self-care and the holistic health of your body? GM Revolution is a men's skincare line with a mission to introduce men to proper skin health. GM Revolution offers 5 skincare products that act as one to give men exactly what their skin needs. Whether you struggle with acne or you're looking to prevent fine lines, GM Revolution works hard to strengthen your body's largest organ, the skin, to fight as your body's first line of defense against your environment. Using code BUILDINGMEN, one word, you can save 15% on all of GM Revolution's products and start seeing the physical and mental benefits of skincare. GM Revolution encourages you to be the revolution in your own life. Now, back to the Building Men podcast. Hello and welcome to the Building Men podcast. My name is Dennis Meralda. Building Men is geared toward helping you become the strongest version of yourself mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. I am lucky today to be joined by Thomas Pfanner. Thomas is a teacher and educator from Eugene, Oregon. And along his journey, he recognized that it's really important to understand the need for young men to get more of an experience, more of things that are not taught within the curriculum. And so Thomas unlocked this program. It's called Unlocking Manhood. And so basically he has this program that we'll get into deeply. And it's something that obviously if you follow along with the Building Men program, you know that this is something that I am 100% all about. So once I heard what Thomas was doing, I said, I need to meet this man. I need to see how he got to this point and how he's, why he's doing the things he's doing and what we can do to support him along this journey. So welcome aboard the Building Men podcast, Thomas. I appreciate being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. Excited
Absolutely.
To be here.
Good deal. So let's start off with, so you're a teacher, you're health and exercise science, or you're a physical education teacher in Oregon. You work with middle school age students, correct?
Correct. Yeah, this is going to be my 6th year teaching. Well, going into my 7th in the fall. So it's been a fun journey.
God bless. I mean, I spent a majority of my career in middle school. I don't know if anybody starts off thinking, I want to work with kids that are going through all these emotional, physical, hormonal changes through puberty. This is where I really want to make my mark and spend my career. I'm not sure if anybody starts off on that way. I think you're either, you find yourself there, you're pushed there, you're pulled there. And then once you're there, you're like, you know what? I believe I need to be at this level, right? It's not something you weren't like 20 years old thinking, I want to work with middle school kids.
Yeah. So my journey is, as I got into education, I have a passion for strength and conditioning, and I have a passion for helping people find the best version of themselves through training and physical preparation, which a lot of that's the mental side too. And I want to work with the high school age range, and it's competitive. It's hard to get into that age group. And so I got offered the job in middle school. And as like you said, as I worked it more and more, I've got into a rhythm here. I still coach at the high school level as well, and have done some work at the collegiate level with some great programs as well. But it's definitely a time that kids need a lot of guidance, and they're really learning about themselves, and they're learning about how the world works. They're really kind of in the process of unplugging from their parents, and depending on the student, that could happen in 6th grade. It could happen in 8th grade, or some of them maybe not until they get to that next level in high school.
It's funny, as a middle school administrator, I would tell parents whenever we would have, in New Jersey it's called INRS, Intervention and Referral Services. And typically those are meetings where there's a student struggling in one way, shape, or form. It might be academically, socially, emotionally, where there's something that just isn't right. And you get, the group of people together, you get the teachers together, you get an administrator, the school nurse, a guidance counselor, child study team. So maybe a psychologist, learning consultant, social worker. And you sit down and you kind of, rack your brain. What can we do to assist this student? Where are the problems? What can we do to assist these students? And the parents would come in and they were always like upset, like, what's wrong with my kid? And I would tell them, listen, middle school is such a turbulent time for kids. Basically, I mean, think back, when we all think back to our experience in middle school, it's probably not without some kind of drama. It's not without some kind of difficulty, some strife. And I would tell parents, there's going to be a difficult time over the next 3 years, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. You just you have to recognize that going in, that middle school is a tumultuous time. The terrains are really challenging. But that's the time kids are starting to push away from adults, but it's when they need that adult support more than ever before in their life. We're really good at offering support to elementary school students in this nurturing way. By the time they get to high school, they kind of have found their own path. It's when they're in middle school that they're pushing us away as adults, but they really need our support and guidance the most. So think back to your own experience, Thomas, in education. Do you feel like your middle school experience as a student prepared you in a way to eventually help middle school age students?
To be honest, I had a lot of struggle in middle school academically. My reading skills specifically were way behind, and I was often overwhelmed, especially in 6th grade. And so I can relate with that kid who is struggling academically, that's trying to put in the effort, and is just not able to perform at the level that they want to perform for whatever reason, regardless of their effort. So I can see, and a lot of the teachers, the language arts teachers and the social, like reading, getting into literature, that is their jam. They love that. They're passionate about it. It comes easily fluid. They can sit down and enjoy reading through a book for an hour. And for me still, if I'm reading a book to my daughter, and even if it's one of those golden, read through, I'm trying to remember the name of the edge of the book. It's golden and that's Bert and Ernie or whatever it is. Right. And by the end, it's like, all right, Maddie, that was one book. I need a little break because my brain is like fried from the focus level that it takes me to get through that. But it has not prevented me from helping people, helping kids elevate themselves and helping people elevate themselves in life. And that's been really and a point, like you said, a point of leverage to be able to understand those kids who are doing all the right things but struggling academically, and still have tremendous potential to be successful in their life.
So now, as a former middle school administrator, a lot of the questions that I'll have for you will be in that realm, just because we speak the same language, and I know people that are listening are probably fascinated by this. So I often wondered, it's not something that people would tell me as an administrator. They wouldn't want to dime out their colleagues or whatever. But I had a feeling that it existed. Do you feel that there's any kind of hierarchy in teachers' minds, or maybe in the administration's minds, or even in the students' minds, as far as the subject area that the teacher teaches and how they're perceived by faculty? And what I mean by that is the traditional core subject areas are math, language arts, literacy, social studies, history, and then science.
Yeah.
So my experience was some of the teachers, not all of them, that I had some teachers that felt that their subject area or the subject matter had carried a higher weight than another subject area. So if I'm the 8th grade algebra teacher and I'm teaching algebra 2 to kids, that was so much more important than someone's teaching music, art, physical education. Do you find that at all in your experience? I don't know how comfortable you are talking about it, your colleagues or whatever, but have you ever experienced that?
I'll be honest, I'll actually call out my own area, which is athletics, of PE athletics. I find that more so, from my experience, more so than academics, like, a sixth grade language arts teacher compared to an eighth grade or a ninth grade language arts teacher. The varsity football or varsity track or whatever it is, they feel that the development of those athletes is so much higher in the priority than developing the younger athletes. And that's where I see a big discrepancy is feeling that like, because these kids are going to be the ones that are shining in the spotlight, that's where all the effort and all the priority needs to go to it. And what can happen is, and I'm sure this happens in other, people can see it in other places as well, but you're not elevating kids from the bottom up. And so they're not developing those foundational skills. So you might be focusing all of this effort on the top, your varsity program. But if your freshmen and JV aren't developed in a year, you're going to be hurting.
I've noticed that I coach many sports as well. And if you want to have a true program, you need to develop a feeder system. There needs to be that kind of solidarity and unity between, when they start playing sports, when the kids start playing sports up until they're at that, more optimal level in high school and beyond. So often you see that there might be like that, every once in a while you get that group of kids that are just really, really good athletes that make their way through high school, and that program, when they're juniors or seniors, they make a run, and all of a sudden, wow, this they did really well. But because there's no sustainable growth, there's no feeder program, there's no systematic way to develop athletes, it's a one and done. So they get to that point and then they're done, and then maybe in another 7 or 8 years. It's those programs that you see, I know it's the way in New Jersey, that are consistently strong. The high school coaches have really good relationships with the middle school coaches, with the feeder programs, the Pop Warner, the Little League, things like that, where they're all on the same page. And so these are the skills that we need you to develop. And they also don't feel like we're up here and you're down here. For us to be at the pinnacle, the base has to be really sound and firm for us to get to that point where we can ultimately, develop this championship type program.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's cool to see those programs that are successful year over year, decade over decade. And I'm sure it's the same I haven't spent a lot of time in academics at the high school level, but I'm sure it's the same as far as, developing kids. I know for me, even though I struggled academically, I had good teachers that taught me the basics. And so when I got to later in high school and in college, and I needed to write an essay, I was like, okay, 3 main points, thesis statements, create that, and then that runs your essay. And it was like, oh, okay, I can do this. I can write an essay on whatever I need to do, because I had those foundations. And it's the same way with are you able to get into an athletic stance? Are you able to catch the ball with the proper technique, depending on where it's placed? All these things are prerequisites to being able to do more complex things when they get older.
So in education, the pendulum typically swings from one philosophical idea to another philosophical idea. It's generationally that typically happens. So I remember growing up, I was in middle school in the 80s, early 90s, and middle school gym class was not for the faint of heart. It was super competitive. I remember dodgeball was a thing where, those red balls came out, and it was, you better, fucking strap up, be ready for this, because you needed to go. And there was this emphasis placed on athletic ability, and it was the haves and the have-nots. So it went from that extreme, right? And I remember that I was a kid who loved gym. I mean, now I flourished in that, and I love the competition part of it. And then as my experience got along as an administrator, as an administrator, it swung all the way in the other direction to where we can't do anything that's super competitive. Every single kid in the class is going to get a participation trophy. There's going to be no winners and no losers. And by the end of the game, we're going to hold hands, we're going to sing a song, and skip to the next class. So in that continuum, as that pendulum swings, where do you find yourself as far as what do you believe we should be doing in that physical education class?
Great question. So competition is important and skill development is important. And I believe in using competition as a motivator to develop skills and as a platform for developing skills. So in my PE class, we'll do units. So let's say we're doing a soccer unit, right? I will always give some time, at least a week, right, before we start games, where we're doing lead up activities to develop skills. So if you have never played soccer before, you will at least have the opportunity to dribble a ball, to pass a ball, to develop some skills each day. And it gives me a chance to kind of see how the kids are. And I'm setting up teams so that they can be evenly matched to some degree. So we've got to have that foundation of skill development. Once we get into the games, the games and the lead up games are an opportunity to challenge yourself, to push yourself a little bit further, to improve and work those skills that you've worked on. Like if you've never touched the soccer ball before and it comes to you in a game and there's a kid coming at you, you're not going to be able to suddenly be able to dribble and get by, to be able to pass to somebody. But if you have a little bit of opportunity to do that, they tend to respond and do better. So I like a blend and really emphasizing to the kids like, hey, yes, we want to compete. We want to put out our best effort, but understand that in the PE setting, this is the objective is to develop skill. The objective is not, your name's not going to be in the paper for winning sixth grade PE flag football champions. It's just not, right? So get everybody involved, get everybody leveling up in their skill level. And that seems to be the sweet spot. But there's definitely some struggle with apathy and some kids that are very interested and very competitive, and others that don't have that either experience, background, interest to be active and be competitive, or they're intimidated by the situation. So it's a balance, but
it's funny as we're talking, it's almost like I'm having a post-observation conference. I just observe your class. This would be a conversation that I'm going to have with a teacher after I observe the classroom. To me, that's the power in any supervisory experience. It's not a gotcha thing, it's a coaching thing. And I'm so interested in the decision-making process with things. So I just kind of went back. I had this kind of, deja vu moment of conversations that I've had with teachers after observing them in a situation. So let me ask you this then. So
yeah,
going back and, to kind of stay on that in that area, you mentioned as you're creating teams, I'm sure a lot of people do as well, have this experience where they went back in school as teams are being selected. And so, again, going back to that antiquated idea, maybe I shouldn't say antiquated depending on how you feel about it, but setting up, students, picking teams. And I look at there's those last two kids are always the last two picked and, going in. So I have some empathy there too, like working in this social emotional realm, understanding there needs to be this, kids have to understand resiliency and perseverance, and they have to understand life's always not going to go your way, and you got to be able to pick yourself up. But as adults, we can set the stage for success in a way where maybe I'm not going to let Johnny from Cobra Kai pick the teams every week because fucking that kid who's the chump in the back is always going to be the last one picked.
Yeah.
And so how do you set up, making sure that, you're looking at skill development, but you're also looking at teaching kids longer life lessons with how you set your lessons up, or maybe how you select, competitive teams in your class?
Yeah, there's some deep conversation with picking teams. So
yeah, for real.
I like to do captains because it gives the kids ownership and it gives the kids an opportunity for leadership. And sometimes I can identify there's a kid that's got some good soccer skills. We have a heavy Latino population at our school. And so maybe he's good at soccer, but he doesn't have a lot of opportunity to be seen as a leader by his peers. So I can put him as a captain, and all of a sudden he's like the guy, everybody's looking up to him. So that's one thing I like to do, is to try to find the kids that need that opportunity to be a leader. When I get to the end of picking teams, when I get like maybe, you get to the bottom quarter of the class or third, just depending on how things are going, I'll just pick the team. Like, all right, I'm going to pick the rest, because at that point it's like the kids are thinking to themselves, okay, once it gets to that point where it's like, okay, who do I not want on my team?
Right. Yeah.
It's like, all right, let me just, you two are going to be here. You two are going to be there. And that helps.
And there are opportunities too to make, why not Napoleon Dynamite and Pedro can be captains one week. It doesn't necessarily have to be the most gifted kid. So I would also set up opportunities for leadership and for strategy. The other thing I would also say is have conversations about that process, right? So it's not just like, okay, you're the captain, pick teams. Let's talk about skill sets. Let's talk about what different people, what different personalities will bring to your group, your organization. I mean, you could have the 5 best kids in the class in one team, but there's only one ball, and you see, I'm sure you've seen that in your experience as a teacher, as a coach. Sometimes the most skilled players aren't always the best team, because you need several layers of, being able to work together in that capacity. So that's one thing I was kind of thinking. The second thing is about life lessons that you believe, and it doesn't necessarily have to be just in middle school. Maybe you identify a specific grade level that you believe from your experience and in your specific subject area. If you're doing your job, kids that go through your class are going to come away with these couple skills, these couple character traits, these couple life lessons that you believe will transfer into them being better adults.
So what question is, which skills do I try to have the kids leave with outside of motor development?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, definitely sportsmanship is a big one. Learning how to win, learning how to lose, and especially the competitive kids, like understanding the difference between, the difference intensity of competition. Because there are a lot of, you get these super competitive masculine 8th grade, 7th grade boys that they have new hormones and tools that they don't understand. And there are times where they need to like really tap into it full on. And there are times where they've got to like taper it down. So like, okay, if you don't win every single game, but you're close and you've got a couple kids on your team that aren't that great and you've gotten them better in PE, like that's good, right? So sportsmanship, understanding that there is a balance between winning in a very competitive environment and winning in like a fun environment. And I'm guilty of this, like with my family, like playing board games, right? They're just like, oh, just having fun, And I'm like, well, no, I'm doing everything I can to win. And they're on a totally different page. So I've got to find out how I can still be competitive and do what I can to win, but have the attitude and the personality and the charisma to make sure that everybody in the group's having fun, right? Even if they're not winning,
Listen, I'm in the Thomas Pfanner, school of thought there. If you're going to compete in something, you're doing the world a disservice. And if you're trying to teach something to young people, unless you're going in with the idea of I'm going to compete in something, I'm going to try to win this. Because I feel like in life, if you're setting people up like, oh, just go and have fun. Obviously, you want to have fun with whatever you're doing. If it's an activity, but you get to decide how you have fun with that. If I'm going to go in, I'm going to have fun, but I'm also going to try to win. I was playing with, I had people over who were playing giant Jenga. Nice. And it got competitive. We're on this, this big wooden table. It's me, my kids, my girlfriend, her kids. We're giant Jenga. It's up 9 feet in the air, and now I'm at the spot where my daughter's next to me. She's 10 years old at the time, and I'm like, if I get this piece off, she's done. So I had this moral dilemma: do I accidentally knock it over and save her fuck that. I'm going to try to do my best. And she knocked it over. So I was like, listen, get better next time. I mean, it sounds horrible, but I don't want to appease her in a way where it's like, I'm not going to, teach her, try your best in all situations. If it doesn't work out, I didn't put her down or whatever. And I said, all right, you lost, you get to choose where we go for ice cream tonight or something like that. But it was one of those moments where I had this moral dilemma. Like, do I kind of tank it here? Do I pull up and then tank it, or do I, maybe she would have surprised us and came through in the clutch there. So I feel like we do a disservice by not fully competing. So I'm glad you said that, because I'm in the same way. It's those people that take it to the nth degree where if they don't get their way, they flip over the game board. They're like, this and that kind of thing.
Yep.
So let's move it forward now, because you've identified in your years as a teacher that there are things that I'm sure that are going really well in the school system and in the curriculum, ways that we can address helping students become the best versions of themselves. But then over the years, you've also identified that there were some shortcomings. There were certain things that we are not doing well. And this is what really hit home with me. And the reason that I reached out to you is, when we talked via Zoom the one time, I explained to you how I started Building Men. And the people that are listening know my journey with Building Men. But I definitely saw that there is a lack of, one, connectivity with young men across the board, and then developing kind of skills around what it means to be a man. So talk to us a little bit about how that program that you developed came about, and then what it's about.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with just a little more about my story and my journey with masculinity. It's really got, the rubber hit the road when I was 18, and my first son was conceived and born during my 18th year. And there were a lot of challenges with that, because I wasn't, his mother and I were together for a very short amount of time, and we're not together when he was born. I did not get to see him very much. I had to work really hard to be involved in his life. I had to work very hard just to get to see him at all, and to contribute. Well, I had friends out partying in college. My extra time was spent working so that you could have the things that you needed to thrive, whether it's going to daycare or having clothes on his back, diapers or whatnot. So it was a big challenge for me from that step of becoming a father at a young age, but also with my relationship with women. It was completely thrown off. Like, I was not successful with women during high school. I had like 2 girlfriends the whole time, and not until my junior year. And afterwards, being 19 years old and having a infant son, doesn't really help your game with the girls. So that next phase of my life was also very challenging, trying to navigate my masculinity and my relationship with women. And thankfully I was able to level myself up in some positive ways and meet my wife. And we've been married for 8 years now and have a daughter. So I've got the 2 kids. And I've seen from being a father. So my son is 13 now. So I've got a son who's a teenager, and I've had this experience, this wildlife experience of becoming a father as a teenager. And I see a lot of things, even with the challenges I've gone through. I have a successful marriage. I have a successful career. I'm able to manage my finances well. I'm able to build positive relationships with people like you, Dennis, and other friends that are doing great things in their life. And none of it was anything that I was taught inside the classroom, sitting behind one of these desks. And I want to illuminate some of these struggles that young men are going to face in their early adulthood as they, jump into relationships and jump into managing their finances, jump into understanding how their mindset can impact the actions that they take and how they feel and the results they get in life. I want to illuminate these things for a handful of young men so that they have the skills that they need to be successful outside of the classroom. Because I've got plenty of friends who kick ass in school, but they're struggling in their relationships, or they're struggling in their finance, or they're struggling in one of these areas that men and women learn differently, right? Men and women are different. And that's why it's not taught in school, because the rules for Jane are different than the rules for John. And in the classroom, all the rules are the same. And in the world, the rules are not fucking the same, not even close. Completely different set of challenges. I can't speak to being a woman. I can't speak to say that it's easier or harder. There are certainly areas where it's harder for women. There are certain areas where it's easier for women. I can attest to the challenges that men have and the responsibility that we have. And I don't think it's really clear how much responsibility men have to perform and perform at a high level in different areas of their life to have success, to have happiness in their career, their relationships, their family, and their, physical health. It's just a lot of smoke and mirrors and political correctness that we try to dance around within the school system. And I think it really hurts young men in the long run.
So my younger brother is 14 years younger than me, and he has his peer group of friends. They're in their early 30s right now, 30, 31 years old. And he has one friend who lives on the Jersey Shore, and he would say it's an area where there's a ton of bars. So he's outside at 2 a.m. when the bars let out, and he would say if he had a puppy dog with him, he would clean up. He said it would be like shooting fish in a barrel. So my brother would go down with his dog. It was just, he knew he was going home with a girl that night if he had a puppy dog with him. So what you're saying to the listeners right now is that it's not the same case if you wait outside of a bar with a 1-year-old. It's not that easy to pick up girls with an infant after a late night. That's what I heard you say first and foremost.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Just making sure I heard that right. So then now you get into this idea of things that you're experiencing. One, thank you for sharing that journey with me, going through having a son when, let's be honest, 18-year-olds for the most part can't take care of themselves, across the board. And then imagine being responsible for another human being. I know myself at 18 years old, and I was pretty responsible. My nickname in college was Pops because I took care of the other kids that I played baseball with. I was kind of like the old man of the household, but there's no way I could have, I can't fathom the ability to take care of an infant at that time.
Yeah.
I mean, all the credit in the world for recognizing that and not having that traditional experience as a 19, 20, 21-year-old, because you were raising a young man at that time. So your journey, while at the time you might have felt like, woe is me, I can't believe this happened. Now you have this 13-year-old son that's probably such an important part of your life, and you're developing a program to help young men understand their place in the world, their place in society, a little bit about their masculinity. So you took something that could have been perceived as this life, altering situation in such a negative way, but you turn it into such a positive. And part of the journey with Building Men is trying to identify with every single person I talk to, Thomas, is that one moment where it's like you could kind of fold your cards and say, you know what, I'm going to tap out. I'm going to blame the world. Or you can say, I'm going to sack up here and I'm going to figure out a way to get through whatever this situation is, believe in myself, and then get to work. And it's not an overnight journey. And I'm sure for yours, there was, a lot of twists and turns and, trials and tribulations. But ultimately, you took this experience and you turned it into something that is going to grow and flourish based on that experience. So I just wanted to credit you for taking that road, because not everyone has the wherewithal to be able to do that. So I just want to thank you for doing that as well.
Absolutely. Appreciated.
So tell us a little bit about this program now. So what is this Unlocking Manhood program? What does it look like, sound like, feel like?
Yeah. So I came up with this because of the discrepancies I see between what men are taught in the classroom and how they're prepared and what they need to be successful in the real world. You might be saying like, well, what does this teacher know about being a winner in the game of life? And to be honest, there's a lot of things I'm still learning, but I've teamed up with a lot of very articulate entrepreneurs that have a lot of success in different areas. And they're going to be coming in and helping me teach the kids. And this is a father-son retreat this first year. The second year, we're going to dive in deeper and hopefully have different retreats with different like specialities and focuses. But this father-son retreat is going to be focused on 4 pillars, which are masculinity, mindset, deep relationships, and finances. And we've got, for each of those 4 pillars, we have a guest speaker who's going to come in that are successful within that area. Much more than I am. I honestly, I've said this before, like I'm just a guy that's trying to put all this together to have the experience as an opportunity. And then we'll also have an adventure, because I believe the men learn through action and connection. So the adventure helps with a metaphor. And it's not like all right, we're going to go ride a roller coaster. It's a active based or not a non-passive, action-based activity where they're making decisions. So we'll be doing paintball. We'll be doing whitewater rafting. We'll be doing mountain biking and rock climbing. And there are lessons within all of those and how they connect with the pillars. So I'm excited to see how going through the challenges and adventures creates bond and connection and interest from the young men, as opposed to, okay, sit down here behind this desk. We're going to give you information. You're going to consume it. And then you're going to go do it. No, it's not. It's a totally different format, right? We're going to go out. We're going to go through challenges and tribulations together. We're going to talk about how this can transfer into our life. And we want to know, based on what you've just experienced, how are you going to apply it into your life? And that is the big thing. That is the big thing that's not taught in school. School is, all right, here's my work. You've given me this assignment. I'm turning it in. I'm going to get a grade back. All right, I'm going to show my parents. They're going to say, good job. You've got this assignment. You're going to get this reward for turning it. Go spend your money at the mall, and then you come back. And then you get into the career, and it's like, all right, I want you to cut these fries, put them into this deep fryer, and then here's your paycheck. Go spend the money, come back, and repeat. I want to see what happens when we say, what do you want to do with your next year of your life? What do you want to accomplish? All right, you figured that out. Now, what are the steps that you are going to do to get that accomplished? And if you really ask and you give time to reflect on those things, and you hold people accountable to the things that they want to do for themselves, it's a completely different ball game, because now you're teaching them to seek what's in their heart and what's in their soul, what's in their spirit as a man, of being creative and competitive and having a desire to take risks and to level themselves up for themselves, not for somebody else.
People that have listened to this podcast know that everything you just said hits so near and dear to my heart in a couple ways. One, you're developing camaraderie and brotherhood, unity, connection. That's one thing that you're doing there. Two, you're putting people outside of their comfort zone in an environment that the only way you're truly growing is if you step outside of that bubble that you put yourself in. Otherwise, growth does not occur. So you're establishing unity, connection. You're helping people get outside of their comfort zone. And then you're providing life lessons through experiential situations. So it's not a passive learning environment. Whenever you take experience and connect it with emotion, and what could be more an emotional experience than going through something with your father, with, like someone that, with other young men and their dads at the same time. So this emotional experience that you're having connected with the unity, it's like a perfect synergy of this event that I believe those kids, however old they are, they're 14, 15, 16 years old, they'll learn more in that week, 5 days, whatever it is, than they will have learned throughout the entire year sitting 180 days in a classroom. Guarantee you that. And there needs to be so much more of that going on. So I believe if you're listening to this and you have a son that's this age, you need to reach out to Thomas to try to figure out how you can get involved with this, because it's such an integral part of young men's development is going through a rite of passage. And he's basically gift wrapping an experience with a father and a son in this rite of passage capacity that we need to do more of this in the world right now. So I give you all the credit in the world for putting this together. It's something that I wish I would have known about sooner. I would have absolutely loved to join you in this with my son. And next time that you do this, I'd be happy to, to tag along and do whatever and to go there with my son, because it's such an amazing event. So Thomas, tell us how, one, we could get in touch with you, and then two, how do we learn more about this Unlocking Manhood program?
Yes, you can. My Instagram is Thomas_Pfanner. It's super easy. There aren't very many of me out there because of my weird name.
Yeah, so it's Pfanner.
Yes. I will. I'll put my phone number in the description of this as well. You're welcome to give me a call, and our email, our website is drivelifeperformance.com, and you can get more information on it. This first camp is really a beta testing version. I've got everything lined up and dialed in, and we're looking for that first group of people that want to take a chance to go on an adventure. It's not been done. This is our first one. I have a lot of experience with the organization. I don't have a lot of experience with business. So if you want to strike this while, the iron's hot, well, I've got, we're doing a weekend long retreat. So it'll be a Thursday through a Sunday. So the 29th is of July through the 1st of August. So it'll be 4 days, 3 nights. And if you're interested, if you have a son between the ages of 15 and 19 and they're wanting to go on an adventure, please just reach out and we can figure out how to get you out here to Oregon for an awesome weekend.
Awesome. And so what I'll do is I'll put all that information into the show notes as well. So when you're listening to this podcast, you can consume all that information from the show notes. I also believe that this is just the beginning. So this is just that we talked before about the difference between the varsity and then the feeder program. So you're starting right now, you're testing it out, you're understanding what you need to do. I look back, like I'm looking into the future 5 years, and now this is happening in 12 different locations all over the country, and it's multi-layered and it's happening several times a year. I just see that that's where this is heading. So all the credit in the world to you for taking this risk and doing this, because it's so needed, and it's something that I fully endorse. And if I can be involved in any way, shape, or form, please don't hesitate to reach out, because this is something so near and dear to my heart as a former educator and the creator of the Building Men program. It's something that I believe needs to happen all over the place all the time. So Thomas, thank you so much for being involved in the Building Men podcast here. To those listening, to get in touch with me on Building Men, Instagram is building.men, Facebook is Building Men Podcast, email is buildingmencoach@gmail.com. And then we just started a YouTube channel. So all the interviews that we're doing will also be up on YouTube. So you'll be able to take a look and see what's going on with Thomas as well when this episode is published. Thanks again, everyone, for listening. Go a step further than you thought you could go today. And we'll see you next time on Building Men.